IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are live here on a Friday, which of course means on our new schedule. This is a little time for some Notre Dame recruiting hour, getting you all ready for what should be a big weekend for Notre Dame, both on the field. Notre Dame sitting at 6-2, taking on the Pitt Panthers, who are sitting at 2-5, a little bit of a struggling program. Notre Dame has a chance to obviously continue the momentum that they built before this past bye week, defeating USC 48-20 the previous week. But also, it's another recruiting weekend because Notre Dame is at home. So we're going to talk visit preview today. Some of the names that you should know that will be on campus this weekend for Notre Dame. I want to start you off, though, with a great conversation about 2025 recruiting. I want to talk about the offensive class potentially in 2025. There's already 4 great commits in the class for Notre Dame in 2025. I want to talk about the baseline of that, what those early commitments mean. I want to break down the rest of the positions, names that you all need to know, numbers that you need to know in case you've been curious of how many wide receivers is Notre Dame going to take, how many tight ends, how many offensive linemen. I'll be able to answer that today as well. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the names on the board that you should know. There's obviously going to be a lot more names that have been offered by the University of Notre Dame in the 2025 class than the guys that I am going to hit on today. But I will say this is that we have, because Brian Driscoll actually together, we put together a little bit of an intel piece. We put up a little bit of an intel piece earlier today, giving you guys some names that you need to know and just some intel, some movement in recruiting. And but that piece focused, and you should go to boards.irishbreakdown.com if you've not seen that piece, by the way. But that little intel piece had focused on the defensive side of the football. There's going to be another offensive intel piece coming out for the board. So again, boards.irishbreakdown.com if you want that thing first. But I'm going to give you guys a little bit of that insight into some of that intel. You're not going to get everything here today, but there are going to be some names that maybe you need to know, maybe names that need a little bit more conversation as of today, maybe some names that have kind of fallen off for Notre Dame. And as far as some guys that maybe we thought Notre Dame would be in on earlier, but as of today, things aren't trending in the greatest direction. So some positive, some potential negative, I guess, just some movement on the board is really what we're kind of looking at here. So we're going to dive into that. And then, of course, at the end, we're going to hit the mailbag. So if you guys have any questions at all, throw mailbag questions in the chat. If you could just do me a favor, obviously doing a solo show today, if you can just put an MB before the question or a mailbag before the question, or I know some people like to put the emojis. So if you want to put the little letter emoji in front of that as well, that would be very appreciated. Would help me not have to navigate the chat as much as I possibly can do without, because you all know that I lose my attention at times, right? My thought process goes one way or the other. So you guys know how to really get me off my groove at times. So I want to make sure that I stay in sync and moving forward here. But MB, so mailbag questions at any time in the chat. We already have some great ones that I have been starring even before the show began. I think a quick shout out to you all should be always appreciated in this chat because everyone comes. I mean, I was literally in here like in half an hour early before we started, and there were already people, talking just general chatter about Notre Dame, throwing mailbag questions, saying what's up. You all are fantastic out there. So big shout out to you as we head into the weekend as well. 2025 offensive class. Let's get this conversation started off. Again, a lot of digging over the last couple months, last few weeks, couple weeks especially. Really, really getting really getting a lot more insight for you all, as I know you all very much appreciate it. We're not going to give you any fluff here. We're going to give you just the names to know, the names not to know, and where things are trending with the University of Notre Dame. When you start with the 2025 offensive class, because my last question I intend to answer here today is just how good can this class be? If Notre Dame is able to close on a lot of the guys that they are early favorites for, or at least in the top group for, how good could this offensive class be? Because we're finishing up a 2024 recruiting class for Notre Dame that arguably offensively is one of the best that we have seen in several years. I mean, I think Brian said maybe in the last like 10 or 15 years as far as just a full scope of an offensive class. When you consider CJ Carr, potential elite quarterback at the top. You consider two great running backs, very different running backs as well. You consider the wide receiver class that Notre Dame has put together as well, including Cam Williams, Logan Saldate, Micah Gilbert, Jack Larson at tight end. And then the four-man offensive line class is looking a whole lot better after they got a commitment, obviously, from Gerby Lambert, who in that intel piece, to give you a little bit of insight, but Notre Dame had identified Gerby Lambert very early on in this process, and he was their top-rated offensive lineman on the board in nationally. Not just a guy that was reasonable, not just a guy that they ultimately wanted, but when they did their due diligence early, he was the guy that they locked in and said, that is the best offensive lineman in the 2024 recruiting class, excuse me. Will they be right? We'll see as he develops obviously at the University of Notre Dame, but he was their guy. And getting that player late to be able to really solidify this class. And again, they're going to be still recruiting Carter Nelson, star tight end that is currently committed to Nebraska, but there's obviously going to be some uncertainty there, right? I think that some days, and we gave a little insight in this in the intel as well, some days it seems very likely that Carter Nelson might end up in the Notre Dame class. Some other days it seems like he's just very okay or very happy with where he's at in Nebraska. So if he ultimately ends up with Notre Dame or not, that would just be that would be a cherry on top. That is not a necessity in this class because you already have Jack Larson. Obviously, Notre Dame wants Carter Nelson. They have always wanted Carter Nelson, but we'll see if they're able to make that flip happen when everything kind of works down the line. Offensively, though, in 2025, which I think is a big reason why this one could end up being a conversation as far as is this a better offensive class than 2024? And just how good is this class? Is this a great class? Is this a historical class from a Notre Dame perspective, not talking nationally? I think that conversation could come up because Notre Dame has created a tremendous baseline for themselves early on in this process. First and foremost, 7 commits in the 2025 class in its entirety, 4 commits on the offensive side of the football for Notre Dame. Deuce Knight, quarterback out of George County High School in Lucedale, Mississippi. They have running back commits from Justin Thurman out of Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay in the state of Florida. Daniel Anderson out of Bryant High School in the state of Arkansas. They also have James Flanagan, who's out of Notre Dame Academy in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Of course, the son of former Notre Dame defensive lineman Jim Flanagan Jr., who had a lot of success playing alongside Bryant Young in his Notre Dame career. Now, that is a tremendous baseline, and I want to talk about that group in its entirety because I've talked a lot about Deuce Knight at this point, and it would be ill-advised and irresponsible for me not to just hit on the simple fact that Deuce Knight is a potential 5-star caliber signal caller out of the state of Mississippi. Notre Dame has gotten a commitment from has gotten a recruit from the state of Mississippi one time in the last 26 years before Deuce Knight committed to Notre Dame. That was a couple years ago. Caleb Offord, the cornerback who eventually transferred out of Notre Dame. So Mississippi is a place that Notre Dame has rarely ever touched base. Like they had back-to-back recruiting classes in 1996 and 1997, including Jarius Jackson, that they made some hayway in Mississippi. But for the most part, that is not typically a spot that Notre Dame frequents and has any sort of success. Not only did you get a big-time quarterback out of a place that you don't typically get a quarterback from, you also got a kid that at 6'5", 200 pounds, right around at this point, he has all the upside in the world. Is he the best quarterback in the 2025 class today? No, not in my opinion. But is there a reality where if he's developed properly that he could end up being the best quarterback to come out of the 2025 class? Absolutely. You can't teach 6'5", arm strength, natural thrower, very athletic. You can't teach the God-given athletic traits that Deuce Knight has, and also he's a very smart young man. So if Gino Guidugli is who we think he is as a developer of quarterbacks, if this coaching staff can get the most out of Deuce Knight going forward, then you have a potential superstar on the table. And why is that so important? Because everyone cares about quarterbacks, guys. Go watch Swamp Kings. And again, I hated the show because I just think there was a lot of deflection. I think that there was a lot of things that weren't touched on. I think there was a lot of glorifying of people that shouldn't have been glorified. I really did not enjoy the series at all, especially at the end. But I remember the one key thing I brought from that was Brandon Spikes, who's a big time recruit coming out of high school. And he said the minute that Tim Tebow committed to Florida, he was going to Florida. And he didn't even have a personal relationship with Tim Tebow. It was just Tim Tebow was a 5-star caliber quarterback that everyone knew, that everyone respected, and could be the face of a program. And that's what Deuce Knight potentially represents for this team. Getting CJ Carr and Deuce Knight in back-to-back classes. And you can even extend that back to 2023 class on with Kenny Minchie, obviously, who I think has a bright future. But when we're talking about just CJ Carr and Deuce Knight in back-to-back, that is two potential high caliber elite quarterbacks in back-to-back classes. And the great thing about Deuce Knight is that when we talk about the entirety of a recruiting profile, you know who Deuce Knight's going to attract? Great players from the Southeast. That is what he's going to attract to come up to play in South Bend, Indiana. It's already happened, guys. This isn't me speculating. This has literally already happened. Go ask CJ May, and I have asked CJ May, and other people have asked CJ May, hey, CJ, what was the final straw there to get you to commit to Notre Dame? What was the final reason that you chose the University of Notre Dame? Because you had whole lot of offers that were on the table, man, including the University of Georgia as an Alabama pass rusher. What was the reason? And he'll tell you, I love Notre Dame, and I was trending that way. But the minute that Deuce Knight committed to the University of Notre Dame, it was over. We already have proof that this is the type of impact that Deuce Knight can have on a recruiting class. We already have that, and that matters, right? Then you look at the rest of the class. You already have your running backs basically done. We'll talk about it. Notre Dame's going to keep their eyes specifically on one other running back in the 2025 class. But you already have two running backs that I think when Daniel Anderson out of Bryan, Arkansas is actually back from his injury, most likely tonight from his foot injury. So we're going to see what he develops into for the rest of the year. But him combined with Justin Thurman, who I know Justin Thurman got off to a slow start this season. But if you have paid attention to what Justin Thurman has been able to do over the last 3 to 4 games, been phenomenal. 9 touchdowns over the last 4 games, well over 100 yards all purpose each game this year, each game the last 4 games of the season. He is starting to trend into the player that Notre Dame was projecting him to be after being a part-time player as a sophomore. You feel a whole lot better about where Justin Thurman fits when you consider the fact that he is a 4.3, 4.4 type of athlete. He brings a lot of speed to the table. So you have your 2 running backs in the class, which means basically Dylan McCullough, as the running back coach at Notre Dame, can go big or go home. Like, he can go big in 2025 and say, hey, let's get a James Simon in this class. Or he could say, we're good with the 2 guys. Now let's start going after the 2026 kids and really start getting the wheels turning in there, because you now have gone from Jeremiah Love to Keidron Young, Aeneas Williams in 2024, and then Daniel Anderson and Justin Thurman in 2025. Folks, that's really, really good, man. That's really, really good. And say you get a James Simon in 2025, and we'll talk about James a little bit more here in a couple of minutes. Then that running back class is just stupid in 2025. The future of the running back position, I remember it was scarce, man. I remember the days of Tony Jones going into the Georgia game being the only healthy running back on the roster. I remember those days. You are not in those days anymore. You are 5 deep at running back today. 2 more dynamic ones are leaving. Are coming to Notre Dame after in front of the 2024 season. Notre Dame is in a great spot at the running back position, and the 2025 class has helped to solidify that future. Last guy that I think was very important for this class for a couple different reasons. That's James Flanagan, who is a tight end out of Notre Dame Academy in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Again, I already mentioned him. Jim Flanagan's son, Jim Flanagan Jr., that played at the University of Notre Dame during the Bryant Young era of Notre Dame football, which that defensive line was filthy. James Flanagan is not only considered a top 150 caliber tight end by multiple platforms already. Not only is he 6'6", 230 pounds, can run, explosive athlete, blocks his butt off as well, but he also filled a hole that you currently had in your recruiting in 2025 and filled it. I think it was a necessity to get him in the class because there was a little bit of negative connotation to the tight end room in 2025 from the recruiting perspective after Nate Roberts had decommitted. You already had a really good tight end in Nate Roberts. He ultimately decommits, and that kind of left a little bit of a black eye on tight end recruiting. You're kind of like, dang, man, like that's not great, right? Like because you're looking at 2024 and saying you got a really good player in Jack Larson, but Carter Nelson's still a kid that you're trying to get. You got Nate Roberts early, then he decommits. You just kind of needed to feel better about tight end recruiting a little bit. And I think that's what James Flanagan provided to this team. He's also the first true pass catcher. I know running backs can catch balls, but first true pass catcher to go along with Deuce Knight as well. So I think that this foursome here has really created a great early buzz for Notre Dame because you know what I know? Deuce Knight is going to recruit his butt off, and he's going to be very attractive to come play football with. Justin Thurman, if you follow him on Twitter, he is very engaging and he is very, very outward with his outreach to Notre Dame targets on the board. You have the three kids on the offensive class: Deuce Knight, Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson, who were all Southeastern kids, which I think, again, that matters, man. That push, I think, could really just make it even more attractive to some more Florida kids, to some more Georgia kids, Alabama kids. Like, you can really reach into that region. And then I think James Flanagan, on top of just getting a really good tight end in the class, also is your first Northern guy in the offensive class as well. He's out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. He's been to South Bend countless times throughout his life. So he knows Notre Dame football. He knows the Midwest. He knows that region as well. So not only do you have the players that can really touch into the Southeast, a part of the country that you need to hit more regularly, but you also have your Northern fix in James Flanagan as well. So that creates a tremendous baseline for a class, in my opinion. Absolutely wonderful. And Deuce Knight is obviously the biggest part of that, but he's not the only part of that. That's really why I wanted to highlight Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson, James Flanagan, because each one of these football players is going to be a great movement moving forward and great asset to a recruiting staff. Because after a player becomes recruited, as long as they're fully locked in, they become a huge asset to the recruiting operation, getting them on campus, getting them around players, giving their perspective, helping to recruit other great football players to the 2025 class. That's a tremendous baseline for Notre Dame. Now let's talk about players that are on the board, positions that we should be looking at, what the numbers look like at each spot. Let's talk about that. Quarterback is done, obviously. Deuce Knight committed in the class. Notre Dame is already turning its eyes to 2026. There's 6 quarterbacks that have already been offered. They also have a really interesting quarterback named Nathan Bernhardt, who's visiting Notre Dame this weekend. He does not have an offer from Notre Dame, but he is considered a top 80 recruit by 247 Sports at the quarterback position. So Notre Dame has already turned their eyes to the quarterback class in 2026. So Deuce Knight, they're done. Running backs. You could potentially be done here and you're completely fine. Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson, you got your 2 running backs in the class. The one cool thing that Justin Thurman presents to the class is that I do believe, because we've had Brian Smith on here before, that thinks that Justin Thurman could potentially be a safety, could potentially be a slot receiver, kind of gadget type player. He gives you some athletic upside. And I know that Notre Dame views him as a scat back. So as a true running back, just kind of a different type of running back than maybe what you have fully on your roster. But I still think that he gives you some flexibility with how you could potentially recruit the position. Because we saw during the USC game, Notre Dame got a visit from James Simon, who's out of Calvary Baptist Prep in Shreveport, Louisiana, one of the top running backs in the 2025 class. It was a little bit of a surprise for some. When James announced that he was coming and made the coaches aware that he was coming, everyone kind of was like, took a step back and they're like, hey, what's up with that? Like, don't you have 2 running backs in the class? You can't take 3 running backs in the class. But I think that there's potential there. And I know that there's potential there because Notre Dame is going to keep recruiting James Simon. This is definitely not a foregone conclusion that Simon ends up in the class at Notre Dame, but I think it is a little scope into the simple fact of running backs, the attrition, the quick change to a roster that you could see, whether that's a transfer, whether that's a player leaving early, whether that's an injury or some combination of the sorts. Running back position could be one that changes instantly on the college level. And also, I think that Justin Thurman gives you some versatility there if that's a player that you want to take. And I also think that for me, and I think that Raymond Harton just said in the chat, and I agree completely, James Simon might be just a player that is too good not to take in the end. If James Simon wants to come play at Notre Dame, James Simon is going to come play at Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame will figure out the roster numbers. They won't do that for every position, for every player, but I think James Simon is the type where you say, you know what, we got enough flexibility, we got enough maneuverability with the roster where you could make that one happen. So keep eyes on James Simon. Again, not a foregone conclusion in Notre Dame's class in 2025, but Notre Dame already has a great baseline at running back in 2025, and they're going to continue to recruit James Simon and see what happens there. Wide receivers is a very, very interesting conversation. So, first and foremost, what's the number right now? I believe the number at wide receiver in 2025 as of today is 3, but I wouldn't be surprised if it eventually gets to 4. So, 3 wide receivers, maybe 4 when all is said and done. Some of the top names to know on the board, and we'll break it down kind of where things are with each of these players. Taylon Taylor, wide receiver out of Geneva Community in the state of Illinois. Jerome Bettis Jr., who is, of course, the son of former Notre Dame running back Jerome Bettis. He is out of Woodward Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. You also have Derek Meadows, wide receiver out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, Nevada. You also have Quincy Porter, who is a wide receiver out of Bergen Catholic here in New Jersey, and Dalen McCutcheon, wide receiver out of out of the state of Texas. He's out of Lucas Lovejoy, by the way. That right now is kind of the board that Notre Dame is really focusing on. There are other talented players that are still on the board. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe even at some point, depending on how things go, if that board gets expanded a little bit. But that is really the players that Notre Dame is going to be focused on most moving forward. Again, that is Derek Meadows, Taylon Taylor, Jerome Bettis Jr., Quincy Porter, Dalen McCutcheon. That's really the players that Notre Dame is super just kind of honed in on right now for different reasons. Derek Meadows, and I'll get to this in the Pittsburgh preview as far as the visitors that you should expect on campus. Derek Meadows is a player that Notre Dame has been high on since he came to campus this past offseason for the Irish Invasion. At that point, he was rated as like a 3-star player, wasn't really talked about a ton. Since then, he's gotten more offers. He's now ranked in the 70s by one platform, overall players in the country. Consensus 4-star recruit now, 6'5", 185 pounds, 4.5 flat laser time at Notre Dame. So he is tall, he is long, and he can run. Again, we're talking about high school juniors, folks. So at 6'5", already running 4.5 flat. This kid is legitimately probably going to be a 4.4 something athlete very early on in his Notre Dame career. Not if not next year for Bishop Gorman. He's that type of athlete. He is visiting for Pittsburgh, which will be his 3rd visit to campus. Notre Dame is in a very good spot with Derek Meadows, and we'll talk a little bit more about him as we kind of get into the visit preview. But right now, it seems like a Notre Dame Washington battle for Derek Meadows for the Bishop Gorman Star. And I'll talk a little bit more about the tug and pull there, and I think what each side has to offer, which is going to be an interesting one when Derek Meadows ultimately makes a decision. But he's certainly a player that Notre Dame wants. He is a priority player for Notre Dame. They love this skill set. If he's developed properly, he could be a superstar, but he is a little bit of a boomer bust player, which we talked about a little bit in the show yesterday, but Notre Dame loves Derek Meadows. Taylon Taylor, a guy that we've talked a lot about in the state of Illinois, dynamic player, a player that I would say for me is probably the best combination of short area explosiveness and speed on this board. I mean, he kind of just has that all-around athletic profile, a guy that Notre Dame loves a lot. He's been on campus 3 times already since he's been offered by Notre Dame during the Pot of Gold offer event on St. Patrick's Day. this one is one where him and his family just aren't in a major rush. This is more of a, as of today, after junior year, after official visits, wanting to make a decision. That's kind of where you are right today with Talon Taylor. So you have to be patient if you're Notre Dame. You have to be patient. But the great thing is, he's in your backyard. Keep getting him to come to campus. Just keep getting him to come back. Keep getting him to come back. If you do, then I think that Notre Dame's going to have a great opportunity when all is said and done. They will have a great opportunity to close on Talon Taylor when that decision is finalized, when it's in the works, when everything is just kind of moving forward there. So Talon Taylor is a big player for Notre Dame in the 2025 class, a player that they absolutely love. They also really, really love Jerome Bettis Jr., who we've talked about a ton on this channel. 6'2", 6'3" now, 180 pounds, having a improved junior year. Sophomore film was not fantastic, but junior year has been a whole lot better. And his offer list is really starting to blow up. I mean, at that point when Notre Dame offered, I think you only had like 2 or 3 offers. And I was actually looking at this the other day. I'm going to pull it up real quick as we're talking. But Jerome Bettis Jr. has gotten a offer list that is really starting to fill out and to rival some of the better wide receivers in the class. I'm trying to pull it up real quick. Here we go. I know I had it on here somewhere. So Jerome Bettis Jr., as of today, now has offers from Notre Dame, Boston College, Arkansas, Missouri, NC State, Texas A&M, Georgia Tech, UCF, and South Carolina. So he's been offered by several good schools now at this point. Notre Dame, though, is very high on him, and he's been high on them for a while. He is just finalizing the process, is how I would kind of put it right now. Taking a look at a couple other places, I think Notre Dame has been the leader for some time. It's just about getting comfortable with everything, right? I think that we've seen now over the last couple cycles that being a legacy recruit to a school matters, but there is also the other side of, and I'm not saying this is necessarily Jerome Bettis Jr., but like this is the tug and pull of being a legacy recruit. When you're a legacy, you know the program well, they know you, you have kind of that insight into what a program can provide. The other side, though, is that some guys just want to blaze their own trail and some guys want to create their own legacy. We saw that with Emmett Mosley, obviously in the 2024 class, a guy that Notre Dame liked and was trying to recruit early on, but he ultimately wanted to do something different. So he ended up committing to Stanford and staying out in California. Some guys just want to take that path. But Notre Dame loves Jerome Bettis Jr., and I think that Notre Dame is the leader for Jerome Bettis Jr. It's just a question of, when the process kind of figures itself out and it ends. 2 other wide receivers that I think you should just keep close eyes on, because again, we're talking 3 to 4 wide receivers. I think ideally, if Notre Dame got Derek Meadows, Talon Taylor, and Jerome Bettis Jr., they might call it a day. But I do think that there's a couple other really talented wide receivers on the board that if they wanted to come, I just think it would be hard for Notre Dame to say no. I just really, I would have a hard time if Quincy Porter, wide receiver out of Bergen Catholic, or Dalen McCutcheon, wide receiver out of Lucas Lovejoy in the state of Texas. If either one of those guys want to come play for Notre Dame in the 2025 class, I would be shocked if Notre Dame didn't make that work, if they didn't make that happen. I would just be very surprised about that. I really would. So keep eyes on Dalen McCutcheon, who's been on campus twice at Notre Dame. Quincy Porter has also been on campus once at Notre Dame, but Notre Dame needs to get him back. He's not been back this season. You need to get him back in the offseason if you can. Both very talented players, both very different players, though. Quincy Porter is more the 6'3" boundary type of receiver. I don't feel great about that one as of today. I would say probably just from my vantage point that Penn State is probably the leader for Quincy Porter, but there is some intrigue with Notre Dame, but you need to get him back to campus to even have a shot there in the end. But Dalen McCutcheon, I think that Notre Dame has a chance with. I think they do. Schools like Oklahoma, Texas, like some of the more prominent schools near him are going to be in the running until the very end as well. But I think that Dalen McCutcheon really likes Notre Dame a lot, and they have a chance to close on him if they choose to. And if he is a player that Notre Dame is able to fit into this class, or if he's the third wide receiver in the class, you never know what might happen, obviously. So keep your eyes again. Derek Meadows, Talon Taylor, Jerome Bettis Jr., Quincy Porter, Dalen McCutcheon. that's the short board right now as far as guys that you really need to know in the 2025 class. Tight end is another interesting conversation because Notre Dame already has a commitment from James Flanagan in the 2025 class. They could potentially be done if they're able to flip Carter Nelson in 2024. If you're able to flip Carter Nelson in 2024 to get Jack Larson and Carter Nelson, and oh, sorry, real quick, I saw people talking about Jamie French in the chat. Look, Jamie French is committed to Alabama. Notre Dame loved him early. I don't foresee that one happening, so we're not going to spend time on that. Right? I'm sure Notre Dame will keep some feelers out and some conversations with Jamie French if you can make that happen. But I don't foresee that one. I think that if Jamie French, I think that Jamie French, if he doesn't stick with Alabama, he's probably going to stay in the Southeast. If not, he probably comes up to play at Ohio State. Like, I think that's probably the order of outcomes for Jamie French. So I just don't see that one happening. So we'll move on from that one. We will. Tight end Carter Nelson, 2024. Notre Dame would love to get him in the class. Again, back and forth. Notre Dame's fighting. We'll see what happens there. If he does not end up in the class, you should expect Notre Dame to push for a second tight end in 2025 to go along with James Flanagan. The number one tight end to know right now, because I mentioned this several weeks ago after Nate Roberts had decommitted and after James Flanagan was the clear number one on the board, that if Notre Dame was going to take a second tight end in 2025, they were going to see what traction they could gain with a couple guys on the board. But if not, they were going to expand. And the only player that has been added to the board since I said that is Lincoln Cure, who's a tight end out of Goodland, Kansas, 6'6", 220 pounds. If you watch his film, he's much more a player that is more wide receiver than he is tight end right now. He's a flexed out option. He plays in the boundary, he plays outside. And Lincoln Cure brings a dynamic element that I think would be very intriguing to match with James Flanagan. And he's a player that Notre Dame likes. They offered him, obviously, on his visit a couple weeks ago when he came for the USC game. It was his first trip to Notre Dame, and he loved it. His family loved it. I think Notre Dame has a chance there if that is the option that they go to. If Carter Nelson is not in the 2024 class, I would expect them to turn the heat up on Lincoln Cure in the 2025 class. I think there's one platform that now has Lincoln Cure as the second ranked tight end in the 2025 class and a 4-star. A player that, if you look at his stats as a sophomore, he only had like 3 receptions. He has been a big junior breakout, man. I think he has right around 1,000 yards this year. He has really turned it on from an on-field perspective and a recruiting perspective this offseason and into this season. He has taken a massive jump. So Lincoln Cure, tight end, 2025, the other guy to keep a close eye on to pair with James Flanagan. Let's talk offensive line in the 2025 class. No commitments currently from the offensive line, but guys that I feel pretty good about, and several that I feel really good about. It's going to start with Owen Strebig, who's out of the state of Wisconsin, 6'8", 290 pounds. He's out of Catholic Memorial in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Someone made a joke on the message board yesterday that actually made me LOL. It made me chuckle a little bit, where it said, it was basically a what spends more time on campus, an undergrad at Notre Dame or Owen Strebig, and the answer is an undergrad. But it's funny because Owen Strebig has been to campus 5 times already since being offered. He wasn't even offered during the pot of gold. He was offered a week or 2 after that, but he has consistently just gone back to school. And at this point, I think I don't hesitate to say this. Owen Strebig, I think his top school is Notre Dame substantially right now. Like, I would say Notre Dame has created a nice lead in that recruitment. But when is it going to end? When is it going to end? He's talking about making a commitment after junior year, after taking official visits. But I've said over the last couple of weeks, I wouldn't be shocked. And again, there's no intel here, but just kind of reading the room a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked if that eventually gets moved up. because I think there might be a moment for Owen at some point here, because I do anticipate him taking a couple more visits over the next few weeks. But I wouldn't be shocked if there's a moment here soon where he's just kind of like, what am I waiting for? Right? Like, it's Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been the school for me for some time. So I think that Notre Dame really has a chance to close this one pretty quickly. And I think that Notre Dame is the leader for Owen Streetbig. So if there's an offensive line that I feel best about right now, it's probably Owen, but it might closely be followed by Matty Augustine, who's out of Brunswick School in the state of Connecticut. We're also talking about actually, Brian had a nice little intel about Ethan Long, the safety from Brunswick School, same school, teammates, 2025 kids, on the intel piece at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So if you haven't seen the piece yet, please sign up on the message board, boards.irishbreakdown.com. A lot of great info, 2025 recruiting in there, and also some nice little tidbits about the 2024 class and how Notre Dame's feeling about, the just kind of the pulse on those kids and vibes around sources and the coaching staff, and lot of great things in that intel piece that you guys should keep an eye out for. Matty Augustine has been to campus at Notre Dame multiple times now. He was a kid that camped this offseason and earned a scholarship offer there. And I mean, quite literally, that day, Notre Dame was like, yeah, that's a guy we want. Like, they made a decision very quickly after they saw him in person that Matty Augustine at 6'7", 290 pounds, still developing to his body, athletic gifts, a little bit raw, but upside is tremendous. That's a guy that they want in the class. So I think that for me, Owen Streebig, I think Notre Dame's the clear leader. I also think that at Matty Augustine, Notre Dame is the clear leader. He hasn't set a firm timeline for when he would like to make the decision, but I think that Notre Dame is the leader by a pretty large margin right now. And yeah, so I think I think that those two players are guys that, if I had to pick today, would be in the 2025 class for Notre Dame. And Chris Ayers just had an interesting point. He said, how many times has Streebig visited Wisconsin? I think it's only been like twice, Chris. Notre Dame has definitely been visited way more than University of Wisconsin, which is of course the in-state school there for Owen, and a team that Owen likes. I mean, he's talked well about Wisconsin in the past, but I would just say that Notre Dame is far and away the higher caliber fit for him right now as of today. Three more offensive linemen I think you should just keep a close eye on. Again, I think that this board could expand. I think the reach could expand depending, but numbers for the offensive line class, I think, is going to be three, potentially four, depending on how things finish up and how roster construction figures itself out. If a guy leaves school early, if a fifth year doesn't come back, if a sixth year doesn't come back, there's a lot of things that kind of go into this formula here. But I think we're definitely at three, could get up to four on the offensive line. So 3 to 4 players. Three other players to keep a close eye on right now for Notre Dame. Will Black, who is another offensive tackle out of the state of Connecticut. 6'7", 285 pounds. He's originally from Canada, and he is a really talented athlete. He looks the part, man. He, again, a little bit raw, still developing to his body, but he's a high school junior. What do we expect? I shouldn't be expecting these guys to be finished products and Joe Alt players today. That just isn't a very reasonable thing. But the athletic gifts are fantastic. He's been in Notre Dame before. Another kid that camped this offseason, got a scholarship offer. A player that Notre Dame has kept consistent contact with over the last couple months. So when you talk offensive line recruiting in 2025, you have to talk about Will Black. You have to. I'm just here to tell you that right now. He's a player that I kind of highlighted in an extra recruiting show this week that I think we need to talk about more. I don't think enough Notre Dame fans and supporters, and even myself at times, have talked enough about Will Black. He's a player that Joe Rudolph and his staff really likes by all indications. So keep eyes on Will Black. I know they're trying to get him. They're trying to get him back to campus. but obviously he hasn't set up anything this season. But also, he's only been to like 1 or 2 places this entire season. He hasn't traveled much, so I don't think it's an indicator of interest or anything like that. I just think that he's a kid that's been super focused on his season. Josh Petty, who's an offensive lineman out of the state of Georgia. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one. I think that this kid is one of the best offensive linemen in the class. I think he might be the best athlete of any offensive lineman I've seen outside of maybe David Sanders Jr. Josh Petty is that athletic in the 2025 class. And Josh Petty says all the right things about Notre Dame. Every time I talk about him, he also talks in depth about Joe Rudolph and how much admiration he has for him and the program. But I'll believe it when I see it, right? I'll believe it when he gets to campus. He's a kid that's never been to campus until a Georgia offensive lineman who is a top 30-ish caliber player, in my opinion. I think he's ranked by at least one service like that. Until he gets to campus, just don't buy it. I mean, we have learned in recruiting, I know I've learned in just my 2 years of doing this now, is that actions speak a lot louder than words. Most kids will speak praises of every part of a program. But then, awesome. Are you going to go visit? Crickets. Crickets. Actions speak louder than words. So I do think that Josh Petty has a good opinion of Notre Dame. I do. Is it enough for him to come to campus? No idea. No idea. I hope. Because, hey, if you can get in with Josh Petty, folks, special kid. He's special. But I think he's going to stay in the South. I think he's going to stay in the South. We'll see if they can change my mind. We'll see if they surprise me. I hope they surprise me because, again, if you ask me who are the most talented offensive linemen in the class, I would say David Sanders Jr. And then after that, the answer might be Josh Petty. It might be Josh Petty. It might very well be. So Notre Dame likes him. They consistently have conversation with him. But until he gets to campus, just not buying it. That's where I am with Josh Petty. Last guy that you need to keep an eye on, Michael Roski, who is an offensive lineman out of the state of Wisconsin, similar to Owen Strebig, a player that visited Notre Dame this season, is also a player that got his offer this past offseason while camping at Notre Dame. 6'7", 285, 290 pounds. You're seeing a theme here, by the way, guys. Josh Petty is 6'5". The other 4 players that I'm talking about right now are 6'7" or higher. All of them. Which again, I think speaks to the type of player that Notre Dame's trying to find. There's a whole lot of offensive tackle body types on this board. A whole lot of them. Whole lot of them. Michael is very talented, gifted mover as well. And I think he really likes Notre Dame a lot. Wisconsin's another school that he's very high on. I would say Notre Dame, Wisconsin are probably the top 2 for Roski as of today. Or someone said it's Raski. I forget. Michael, I'm going to need to hit you up later, man, because I completely forget how to pronounce your last name. My deepest apologies. But he visited for the USC game. And actually, he visited for the Ohio State game. Excuse me. Not USC. He visited for Ohio State. And his situation is this. He is very talented, high upside, player Notre Dame likes, but he's dealing with a knee injury that has cost him his entirety of his junior year. I think he played in like 2 football games before he suffered a knee injury. So that Ohio State game, I think, was actually big for him because he got to talk to the coaching staff one-on-one about the injury, the recovery, the rehab. I mean, basically where you are with this one is Notre Dame is kind of waiting to see how he recovers and to see how everything works out. So he's a player that Notre Dame likes. He's a player that Notre Dame is recruiting. But we have to see how he comes back from the knee injury because anytime you have a kid that's around 300 pounds with a knee injury, things can get dicey with lower body injuries. Lower body injuries and back injuries for offensive linemen can get a little hairy at times. But he's also 17 years old, so I'm sure he'll recover quite fine from it. But you gotta do your due diligence from the injury perspective. So that's the offensive line board. Again, Strebig, Augustine, Will Black, Josh Petty, and Michael Roski. That's the offensive line board as of today. Could it expand at some point? Sure. But as of right now, that's kind of the players that Notre Dame is really focusing on. So wide receivers, anticipate 3 in the class, potentially 4, depending how things work out. Tight ends, if Notre Dame does not get Carter Nelson in 2024 class, you should anticipate them going after a second tight end in 2025. Lincoln Cure is the name guy to know. And then 3 to 4 offensive linemen in the class. You already have your quarterback. You already have 2 running backs. Maybe you take James Simon, but otherwise, that would be the offensive class here. Now, the next question is, because if you ask me today, who are the players that Notre Dame is in very good positions with? I would say this. Commitments from Deuce Knight, Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson, and James Flanagan. I think they're in a great spot for Derek Meadows. I think they're in a good spot for Taylor Taylor. I think they're in a great spot for Jerome Bettis Jr. And I think they're in a solid to good spot with Dalen McCutcheon if that's a player that they push for. Solid spot for Lincoln Cure, but that one is still pretty early. Owen Streetbeek, they're in a great spot. Matty Augustine, they're in a great spot. Will Black, I think they're in a solid to good spot. And Michael Roski, they're in a solid to good spot as well. So you're in a good spot with a lot of players there, folks, a whole lot. And if you close on just 80% of the players that you are in the lead for right now, not even counting who will get added to the board, what will happen next, Notre Dame has a chance to put together a tremendous offensive class. And just how good, though. And Archer, we'll talk about that in a couple minutes, man. That's a great mailbag question. It's Joe Rudolph is Joe Rudolph's first name. So yeah, Joe Rudolph. Not Kyle, not to be confused with Kyle Rudolph, tight end from the University of Notre Dame. So how good can that class be, folks? How good could it be? I think personally, just from my perspective, especially as comparing players as juniors to where they each were, I think that this class has the potential to be better than the 2024 class. I really believe that. You're betting on a little bit more upside in the 2025 class, in my opinion. I mean, I think of like Deuce Knight versus CJ Carr. That would be a great conversation, right? And it is a great conversation. Who would you rather have, CJ Carr or Deuce Knight? If you say CJ Carr, because he is a lot further along and he's a lot higher floor and he's also a really good player, I wouldn't say anything to you. Like you are right, and you would have a fair point there. If you told me I'll take Deuce Knight because they're going to get the same amount of coaching, and if I get the most out of Deuce Knight comparative to if I get the most out of CJ Carr, then Deuce Knight probably wins that conversation, right? Because I think that he clearly has the more upside of the play. It's just about where the floors are in comparison. So Deuce Knight versus CJ Carr is going to be a great conversation for now on until the end of signing day. And it's also going to be a great conversation into their Notre Dame careers because they're only a year behind each other. So when CJ Carr is a redshirt freshman or a true sophomore, depending on how much he plays as a freshman, you're going to get Deuce Knight to come right behind you. And you guys are going to battle for the next couple years and be in the same quarterback room. So that comparison is going to be one that we are going to have as Notre Dame fans. And I think it's fun. I think it's really fun. You can never have enough talented quarterbacks in a room. Never, ever, ever. So getting those two together, I think is going to be tremendous. That wide receiver group, folks, again, upside is in this conversation here. But if you get Taylor Taylor, Derek Meadows, Jerome Bettis Jr., and then if you could push it to 4 and let's say get a Dalen McCutcheon, that is a great wide receiver class. Not good, great. And in that sense, like I will gamble on a Jerome Bettis Jr., for instance, because he's a little bit of a gamble. He has some traits that you like, some that you still need to be. You need more proof to how good he can be. But that wide receiver class has a chance to be tremendous. And all around, I mean, again, Derek Meadows, height, weight, speed, freak. Taylor, dynamic, one of the best wide receivers in the 2025 class overall. And then if you're able to get like a Dalen McCutcheon with the floor that he brings to the table and the dynamic ability and space, that's a great wide receiver crew. You already have James Flanagan in 2025, who is not the polished player that Jack Larson is today, but James Flanagan is, again, it's similar to the Deuce Knight CJ Carr conversation. I think it's pretty safe to say that if James Flanagan hits his upside, he is a better prospect than Jack Larson. Jack just brings the floor to the table. So those things are comparable. Offensive line, I think, is going to be where the big separator is in 2025 compared to 2024. Because Gerby Lambert, big time upside, right? Anthony Knapp has grown on me tremendously. Peter Jones is super solid. Styles Prescott has some things that you like. But if Notre Dame is able to get, hypothetically speaking, an Owen Strebig, Matty Augustine, Will Black class, let's say, I will take that class over 2024. I will. Because I think that Owen Strebig and Gerby Lambert are comparable in the caliber of player they are. I actually like Owen more as a junior than I liked Gerby, although Gerby is very good. Matty Augustine, I think I would take over any offensive lineman in 2024 as juniors because he's having a really nice junior year. And Will Black is the type of upside player that I think I would take over just about anybody in 2024 as well. That offensive line class would be a separator over 2024, in my opinion. So it could be a potential wash at quarterback, running back. 2024 wins. I like Justin Thurman. I like Daniel Anderson. Keedron Young and Neas Williams is just different. That was a different group. Tight end wise, I would give the edge to 2025 as of today to potentially add on to that, depending on how things kind of finish out. If you're not able to get Carter Nelson and you get a second tight end in the class, I think it's a clear win at tight end in 2025. Wide receiver, I think, is a bit of a wash. I mean, Cam Williams is the highest graded player in those two classes right now, in theory. But what type of jump does Talon Taylor make as a senior? Is that a comparable conversation? I think it could be. And then outside of that, you're comparing Derek Meadows to Micah Gilbert. And so I would say that's a little bit of a wash. And even if you want to give a slight edge to 2024, I don't think it's like an insurmountable one. So 2025, to wrap this up, you have a chance to put together a tremendous offensive class. And I think that you could at least rival 2024, but I think it could be better, man. I truly do. And it might be recency bias and just kind of getting the excitement of 2024, 2025. It might be because of Deuce. Like it might be because of all those factors together. But I truly think that 2025 could be the best offensive class under Coach Freeman so far. And I think it could be the best Notre Dame has had in some time. That is going to do it for the 2025 class conversation, folks. Next, I'm going to get into a little bit of a Pittsburgh preview here, talk about the recruits that you should expect on campus. It's a little bit of a lighter week for Notre Dame. So not a ton of names, but some very, very important names. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell for listening to me live on YouTube. If you are listening on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com to sign up for the latest team and recruiting intel. We're going to hit the visit preview for Notre Dame versus the Pitt Panthers here next on Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. All right, folks, we are going to get now into a little bit of a visit preview. I put out a piece at irishbreakdown.com giving you all a little bit of insight into the players that you should expect on campus this weekend. And there are 4 players that I really want to touch on extensively here because it's not a long list of key targets for Notre Dame, but it is a very they're especially important in this class. I can see all 4 of the players being in the class eventually when all is said and done. I think that it's that important this week. First, commits that will be on campus, because I always like to mention this because I always think it's cool when you see the groups that come back to help recruit for Notre Dame and to just generally, can't say generally, excuse me, just keep developing the relationship with one another and the camaraderie within a group. Cam Williams, wide receiver out of Glen Ellen, Illinois, Glenbard South, 2024 commit to Notre Dame, will be on campus, as will Jack Larson, tight end out of Charlotte, North Carolina Catholic. Styles Prescott out of Fishers, Indiana, Hamilton Southeastern, offensive tackle. Defensive end, Logan Thomas out of Lakewood, Ohio, St. Edward, formerly out of the state of Texas. Cornerback, Carson Hobbs, Cincinnati, Ohio, Archbishop Moeller will be on campus as well, as will safety, Bronte Johnson out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, North Side. And safety, Tabron Benny Powell, Westchester, Ohio, Lakota West, another player that's having another really good senior season so far, Tabron Benny Powell. That's the commits that will be on campus. But we're focusing on 2025 here. and the players that will be on campus for Notre Dame. So very interesting ones here. Okay. I'm going to start. Actually, let me take a look here real quick. Okay. So I'm going to start first and foremost, offensive side of the football, then we'll go over the defense because there is one player offensively that we need to talk about that will be on campus, and then there's our three defensive players for 2025 class that are essential for Notre Dame. The first one, Derek Meadows, Las Vegas, Nevada, Bishop Gorman, a player that we've talked about a ton, and I talked about a lot in the first segment as well. So 6'5", 185 pounds, visited this offseason during the Irish invasion, a player that Notre Dame has quickly made a priority, quickly did make a priority in this class, and that has continued throughout the process. This will be his third trip to Notre Dame. And where we are with this one is that coming into this visit, and I have an interview that's coming out with Derek Meadows on irishbreakdown.com, so keep eyes open for that. He also came on the podcast before. If you remember, there was a Notre Dame recruiting hour I did in the summer where he came on and talked a little bit of his process, just how everything was going, getting ready for the season. Bishop Gorman obviously is one of the best programs in all of high school football. So they have high standards, win state championship practically every year. So he was, give some insight into some, some preparation stuff. As of today, coming into this visit, I would say Notre Dame and Washington are fighting this one out for Derek Meadows. And I think that Notre Dame could say is the leader for Derek Meadows right now, but Washington is a school that is going to be in this one until the very end. I think that that's where we are today. There are a couple pools to both sides. One, I think he loves Notre Dame. When he's been there, it's been kind of a different vibe for him. And I remember asking him just about his general feelings of Notre Dame. And he even said, I think something close to like, it's hard to quantify being on campus at Notre Dame. Like, it's just a different vibe. It's just hard to explain, man. It really is. And I think that he has fallen in love with Coach Stuckey, the coaching staff, and the pitch that they've given to him because they were on him very early in this process. When they first offered Derek Meadows in the summer, he had a few offers, but not a ton of offers. He's gotten a lot more traction since then, and he definitely wasn't rated the way that he's rated. I mean, he's a consensus 4-star recruit, ranked in the 70s by 247 Sports Now, or actually by On3, excuse me. So he's a big time player considered from a recruiting side of things, but Notre Dame was on him very early and made him a priority very early on in this process once they saw him work out at Notre Dame. So the pull to Notre Dame is easy. The pull to Washington is very interesting, though, because when you watch the University of Washington right now, as a wide receiver, how would you not love being a part of that program that loves to throw the football so much, has a great offensive system under Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb. They have great wide receivers right now, but also wide receivers that aren't going to be there that much longer. So if I'm a wide receiver, a young guy, I'm like, hey, they're developing wide receivers really well, but also Roma Dunze is going to be out the door after this year. Jalen McMillan, depending on if he gets back healthy and how the rest of the season go, he could conceivably enter the 2024 NFL draft. Jalen Polk's a guy that is draft eligible if he chooses to do that. Giles Jackson, I believe, is a senior. So that wide receiver unit is a very veteran group that could conceivably all leave if they wanted to. Even if you return one or two of those guys, there's still going to be playing time opportunities. And I also think that the pool of Roma Dunze has a similar background to Derek Meadows. Both longer, explosive, semi-raw kids coming out of high school. They both went to Bishop Gorman. And I think seeing him and seeing what he's accomplished out there in Washington in that offensive scheme is very attractive to Derek Meadows. So that being said, I think that there's a lot of positives for Derek Meadows to go to Notre Dame. I think there's a lot of positives to Derek Meadows to go to the University of Washington. Both those things involved, I think, are pulls to both sides. I think Notre Dame has a great chance, though. I think they have a tremendous chance. And I think that, and I have an article coming out where I basically phrase it like this. I think Notre Dame has a chance to close the deal on Derek Meadows this weekend if he has a great visit. Because the timeline, there is no firm timeline. I'm not using third person, Tommy. Brian popped in here and was just helping me with some mailbag questions. All right, shut your mouth. Just kidding. That was mean. I'm sorry. That was really really mean. But I think that they can really solidify things with Derek Meadows this weekend if he has a great visit. I really do. So Meadows, priority for Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a chance to close that guy out. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, players that you need to know. Defensive end, Damian Shanklin out of Indianapolis, Indiana, Warren Central. Warren Central sounds familiar to Notre Dame fans because that's where Sheldon Day went to high school. And funny enough, when Damian Shanklin actually initially got his offer from the University of Notre Dame, he spoke about Sheldon Day because apparently they have a little bit of a personal relationship, being from the same program and everything. So Damian Shanklin is 6'4", 230 pounds, more of the Viper type. He is really going. He is trending in such a positive direction from a recruiting perspective. He is having a big season. He's recruiting wise. He is going massively to a higher level from a ranking perspective. He's also collecting a whole lot of offers. Damian Shanklin is a player that Notre Dame is really high on at this point. And again, this is his second visit to Notre Dame in 3 weeks. He talked about rushing the field against USC. Now he's back for the Pitt game. So 2 times in 3 weeks, Damian Shanklin will be on campus. Remember, I told you guys, and we've talked about this before. Action speaks louder than words. His actions say that he really likes Notre Dame, right? In-state kid, been to campus now 2 times in 3 weeks, speaks very highly of Notre Dame. There's no timeline, and I don't necessarily think that he's in any rush to make a decision right now, but Notre Dame has a chance to, I think, really just kind of solidify their standing this weekend with the Damian Shanklin. So keep your eyes out for that stud pass rusher out of the state of Indiana. Creed Thomas, cornerback out of Phoenix, Arizona, Brophy Prep. Brophy Prep, if that sounds familiar to Notre Dame fans, same high school as Benjamin Morrison, who is now a All-American corner for the University of Notre Dame. Actually, Creed Thomas actually played with Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison was a senior when Creed Thomas was a freshman, but they had a great relationship. He talked a whole lot about just everything he learned from Ben and everything that he's just so proud of what he's been able to accomplish so far at Notre Dame, and kind of a role model to him a little bit. Creed will be back for also the second time in 3 weeks. He came for the USC game. He was his intention to get back for this game as well. Notre Dame loves Creed Thomas, and they have from the start. As a sophomore, he played corner and showed a lot of ability. As a junior, he's playing safety and kind of even looks a little bit better. He's being viewed as kind of that Swiss Army knife on the defense where he could potentially play outside corner. He could potentially play safety. He might even be able to play nickel. I think he could play all of the above potentially on the next level. So Notre Dame is just very, very high on Creed Thomas. And I think that, again, Cree is kind of, and I had it in an article after his last visit. Cree kind of said something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, I can pull up the exact quote in a second. But he said, when he knows, he will know, but there's no timelines, and Notre Dame is going to be in it until the ends. Something to that degree. So Notre Dame is in a great spot. They are the leader. I think Wisconsin is another school that has put their best foot forward and done a lot of good things with Cree, and I think they did a great job recruiting Cree. But I think if Notre Dame has another great visit with Cree Thomas, this one could end pretty soon. I think it could. I think that Notre Dame is in a tremendous spot. They have shown everything Cree Thomas, because Cree Thomas is a very different cat. Like, he's there in the best way possible. Not different as in like that dude weird, right? No, he's different as in he values a lot of things outside of football, outside of athletics. He is a very academically oriented kid, comes from a great family, just a really good potential fit, man. I really, really like him a lot. So keep your eyes on Creed Thomas visiting again from Phoenix, Arizona, Brophy Prep. Safety Ivan Taylor out of Winter Garden, Florida. West Orange is the other key player that I wanted to hit on here. He's, of course, the son of former Pittsburgh Steeler great cornerback Ike Taylor. He will be on campus this weekend as well. Third time on campus for Mr. Ivan Taylor. We've talked a whole lot about Ivan because Ivan is considered a top 35 player by two different platforms so far. And he brings a whole lot of big time versatility to the table as well. I could see him being a true over the top safety working from depth. I could see him being a guy that could play some man to man coverage as a field safety, rotating down. I could also see him as a pure nickel on the next level. I think that he brings a whole lot of coverage versatility to the table that is super, super interesting. And Notre Dame has loved Ivan Taylor for a long time. Although he was a highly rated kid, he didn't get offered until he showed up to camp this offseason. He camped at Notre Dame, did tremendously well, and was quickly became a priority recruit for Notre Dame. I had a recent update on Ivan Taylor on the site. And basically where things are today is that I would say that Notre Dame is the leader for Ivan Taylor. And I would say that without hesitation. But the thing that we need to understand about this is that this isn't one where he's in super rush, Ivan Taylor, but we do have a timeline of understanding here. He is going to make a commitment after his junior season when he'd be able to sit down and just kind of decompress all his emotions. But he's been to campus 3 times. Notre Dame is very high. He is very high on Notre Dame. So I know Notre Dame has put themselves in tremendous position with Ivan Taylor. So that's the 4 players that you need to keep like close eyes on coming into the visit this weekend. Ivan Taylor, Creed Thomas, Damian Shanklin, and wide receiver Derek Meadows out of the state of Nevada. There's also some intriguing players that are coming to campus that do not currently have offers from Notre Dame, but each one of these players has legitimate Power 5 offers right now, and just kind of intriguing to see a couple of these kids get on campus. And I'm not necessarily in offer watch for any of these players, as in, like, if they have a great visit, they will definitely get offered. But it is intriguing just kind of seeing some of the names. So keep eyes on Ashland, Ohio High School 2026 quarterback. Remember, we mentioned before with Deuce Knight in the 2025 class, all eyes now for Gino Guidugli and this offensive staff for the quarterback position is 2026. Let's see who we like, right? And Ashland, Ohio High School quarterback Nathan Bernhard is a player that is really developing well from a recruiting perspective. He's ranked as a top 80 player by at least one platform as a 4-star player. He has a developing offer list, 6'5", 225 pounds. And in my preview today, I put a little bit of his week 5. So weeks 1 through 5, he had a little bit of a highlight tape that he put out on Huddle. Very impressive looking kid. Very impressive. And I'm just curious because Notre Dame's already offered 6 quarterbacks in the 2025 class. Again, I'm not necessarily predicting that they will offer Nathan Bernhard this week, but I really do think that he's just a interesting player to keep an eye on and a highly ranked player. Another kid that's incredibly interesting that will be on campus this weekend is offensive tackle Jack Lang out of Eureka, Missouri High School. 6'8", 275 pounds. He has legitimate offers right now, folks. Schools like Michigan have offered him already, Iowa, some of the Midwestern powers that when they offer offensive linemen, Michigan and Iowa, you take notice. You always do because they do a very good job of traditionally developing offensive line play. 6'8", 275. You also can't teach that size. I have an update that will be out soon on the website about Jack Lang coming into the visit as well. Notre Dame, I'm interested to see that one. I'm interested to see if he does end up with an offer at some point because he's ranked as a 4-star player by the only platform that has ranked him, by the way, which is just bizarre. And I know we're talking about a kid that's out of Eureka and a little bit of a smaller school, right? But one platform has ranked him as a 4-star. No other platform has even ranked him at this point. But 6'8", 275, lots to like there. As is Paw Paw, Michigan High School offensive tackle Darren Stray. Another kid that is listed at like 6'7", 265 pounds right now. Has legitimate Power 5 offers today out of the state of Michigan. another player to keep an eye on, as well as Michael McDonough, excuse me, out of Tinley Park, Illinois. Victor J. Andrew. He is another offensive lineman that I believe he's been offered by Illinois, Missouri, a couple of those Midwestern schools. Dayton Hopkins, who's out of Herman's Missouri High School. He has offers from Kansas State, Illinois, Iowa State right now. He's a 6'6", 210-pound pass rusher who's very raw. But like I watch his highlight tape, folks, I'm like, dang, dude, like he could play. Like he's got a lot of talent. He's long and explosive, just super skinny, and he's a kid that needs some tremendous development. They need some tremendous development. So, but he has a lot of room to grow, which is great to see. Defensive end Charlie Wolben out of DeSoto, Kansas school. He is also 6'5", 215 pounds. He is really starting to blow up on the recruiting trail. Nick Moore out of Dandridge, Tennessee, Jefferson County, 6'3", 285 pounds. Another talented kid that will be on campus. Mickey Vaccarello, which I absolutely love that name. He's out of Cannonsville, Pennsylvania, Peters Township. I actually talked to my buddy that lives up there because apparently that's up near Pittsburgh. 6'3", 210 pounds. Crazy stats. So this team is 9-0, Peters Township up there. Great school, apparently. They have only given up 37 points in 9 football games this year. They're 9-0. 37 points in 9 football games. For you mathematicians out there, that's a little over 4 points per game that defense has given up. He plays outside linebacker, comes off the edge a little bit, plays tight end as well. Mickey Vaccarello. Again, no idea if Notre Dame will ever make a move there, but that is an absolutely awesome last name. And then Cody Haddad, who's a safety out of Cleveland, Ohio, St. Ignatius, has been limited to 2 football games this year due to injury, but another young man that is getting some legitimate Power 5 looks. So that is some of the other interesting names that you should keep an eye on this weekend. So again, smaller list from a recruiting perspective this week for Notre Dame versus Pitt, but some vitally important ones, as well as some players that Notre Dame is bringing in that do not have offers currently, but let's keep an eye open. If they make a move there, it could be tremendous. It could be very interesting to see if any of these kids do end up with offers from University of Notre Dame, because they're certainly talented and all of them are getting legitimate Power 5 looks. A lot of good schools too. I mean, there's schools like Michigan, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, like some legitimately good. I mean, because sometimes I think at these visits, kids come in and you look at him and you're just like, it's a MAC level school, a MAC level player. And then you look at his list and you're like, okay, Miami, Ohio, Toledo, Buffalo, like that's the offer list. But Notre Dame is bringing in some kids this weekend that are a little bit of late risers, but they already have some legitimate Power 5 interests, which I think is very interesting to look at. So a lot of fun recruiting intel that will come out of this weekend. Make sure to go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. I will have an update probably on Sunday this week because there's a very short list of players that will be on campus of note. So make sure to go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and you get the latest intel from the recruiting perspective early on. But that's going to do it for this Notre Dame versus Pitt recruiting preview. We're going to go to the mailbag next. If anybody still wants to throw in some mailbag questions, please do. MB before the question would be very much appreciated as I navigate this from a solo show. But we're going to get into the mailbag next here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Mailbag time. Let's get going here. Folks, we had a super chat, I believe, at some point here. Yep, here we go. Mailbag questions. Let's get rocking. Raymond Harton with a super chat. Excuse me. Raymond, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. You're always in the chat. You're always a great member. Thank you so much for the cause here. Happy birthday, buddy. Go Irish. Thank you, Raymond. I appreciate it so much, man. For people that maybe came into the show a little bit later, there was a lot of people. I should have pulled them up as I was talking, but it's a little hard on a solo show. A lot of people have wished me happy birthday. Today is my birthday. I just want to thank everybody so much for one, joining me on my birthday, being in the show, and then of course, as always, like Raymond, you didn't have to throw a super chat, but I do appreciate you doing it, man. Thank you so much for the birthday wishes. Truly do appreciate it, man. 32 years young today, folks. So it's going to be a busy weekend working and trying to enjoy it with the family as well. But Raymond, you are always very much appreciated, man. Thank you so much. Truly. All right. Hulk Strongest getting us popped off here. Can't wait for CJ Carr. Is he an early enrollee? Yes, he is. And thank you, everybody. I see a lot of happy birthday chatter in the chat. Thank you so much. Very much appreciate it. Hulk strongest. So CJ Carr is an early enrollee. If you remember, he was actually a player at one point. No refunds anymore, man. No refunds anymore. That $5 is going to go to my weekend. All right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry there, Raymond. I'm sorry. CJ Carr is going to be an early enrollee. If you remember, though, back there was at one point where Notre Dame was like, dang, what are we going to do in the 2023 class? Like, this was before Kenny Minchie had kind of made the decision of like, hey, I do want to pursue Notre Dame. And there was a lot of names that were on the board. And then you're just kind of like, ooh, like, you don't know what's happening with the Notre Dame quarterback recruiting. There was actually conversation at that point, Hulk Strongest, about is CJ Carr going to reclassify to 2023? Ultimately, that wasn't something that he wanted to do. And it wasn't something that happened, obviously. But all that to say is he is academically very ahead of the curve, right? Very ahead of the curve. So, yes, he is going to early enrollee. You should expect CJ Carr here in January. He will be there. We had another question. Actually, we had a super chat here. Nathan Milton. What is this? Super chat. Thank you so much, Nathan. Did Notre Dame staff BK the bed on the Scott recruitment? Are we talking about Justin Scott, Nathan? Are we doing this again, man? Are we doing this again? We can do it if you want. Did they? So BK the bed, obviously, poop the bed is what we're going for here. So Nathan, we've talked about this a lot, man. I don't want to go like super in depth on it, but like here we are, right? So here are the key points to this. There were missteps early. Notre Dame was the foregone conclusion in the leader at one point. Notre Dame made some missteps, put themselves a little behind the eight ball. Despite that, he was still ready to go commit to the University of Notre Dame. But Notre Dame at that point was like, dude, like, slow it down. Make sure you want to be here. Because I think that the worry was, and I think it would have ended up being true, is that if he would have committed then, I think he would have kept taking visits and he might have ended up decommitting at some points. Like, it would have been possible, right? So there were 100% missteps. I think that after the commitment thing happened, there were a couple more missteps. And I think that you weren't able to close the deal or even get in a good position when he ultimately did commit to Ohio State. You haven't been able to get him back to campus this season as well. So did they mess up that recruitment early on? Absolutely. Did they try to recover? Sure. But if you're asking me, like, it was a bad recruitment just in general, man. It was. I mean, they messed that one up very early and they weren't able to recover ultimately. So we'll see what everything happens. We'll talk about defensive line recruiting at some point here, but I think Notre Dame has a chance to recover. But you lost out on Justin Scott. You did. You missed that boat. He's not going to be on campus. It's not going to be in the class. Ultimately, we've been telling you that, guys, for months. I'm here to reiterate it again. Justin Scott will not be going to the University of Notre Dame. It's just not going to happen. Ultimately, in the end, I would say though, and I know Brian hinted at it the other day, but senior year for Justin Scott hasn't been too pretty. So maybe there's something there. I don't know. Not trying to cope here, right? It stinks. You missed out on a elite level talent in your backyard, ultimately. So it was a misstep. Yes, a whole lot of missteps. Pooping of the bed, if that's how you want to put it. Sure, we can say pooping of the bed. I guess that's fine. All right. We had a question from Matt S. I said, I'm curious about an early enrollee list for 2024. Matt, I'll put something on the message board at some point, but like quickly working through it as far as guys that I definitely know will be early enrollees. CJ Carr is one. Cam Williams is another. Micah Gilbert and Bryce Young should both be early enrollees as well. Jack Larson, I believe, is an early enrollee. Not sure about Saldate. I actually think that he might not be a early enrollee. Gerby Lambert is, well, actually, no, Gerby Lambert would not be an early enrollee. Trying to think of any other offensive linemen. I think Anthony Knapp might be an early enrollee. Peter Jones, I don't believe so. Styles Prescott, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that one. Ohio has weird rules, so I don't think Logan Thomas will be. Bryce Young, I said yes. Cole Mullins, I believe, will be an early enrollee. I would be shocked if he wasn't. Sean Sevillano, I believe, is an early enrollee as well. Linebacker wise, Kingston, you can anticipate being an early enrollee. Bodie, I'm not sure. Teddy, I'm not sure either. I'll get back to you on those ones. Cornerback, Carson cannot because there's weird Ohio rules. Leonard Moore, I believe, is an early enrollee. Safeties, Tabron is in Ohio, so they have weird rules. I'm not sure about Bronte, and Kennedy, I believe, is an early enrollee. So there's a lot. There's a lot, but we will, yeah, I'll definitely get you a list on there. And yeah, so go to boards.irishbreakdown.com if you're not on there already, Matt, and we'll have an updated board for you as well. And I'm curious what's happening in the chat. I don't know what's happening right now, but I'll get to that later. Iris Gordy, now, what's your favorite birthday memory from your childhood? Oh man, favorite birthday memory from my childhood. IGK, I don't think I have one. So I come from a family that didn't really celebrate things much, which is kind of sad, I guess. Kind of sounds sad. I don't know. Like we only went on like I think one vacation my entire childhood. Like one vacation. Birthdays, we never my mom and my dad are very much homebodies, so like they didn't do much, which I think explains why after I got out of that house, I was like, I want to travel everywhere and see all different things, and like go on planes and get out of the country and go to different parts of the United States and just explore. So I don't think I really have one, man. I know again, I know that's probably sad, but my birthday is kind of close to Halloween, so I guess when I was growing up, maybe there was like a cool like real quick transition into Halloween and stuff, maybe a Halloween party, but like nothing that I remember, to be honest. I know that's super sad, I guess, but nothing. Yeah, we didn't really celebrate things, man. It didn't really, didn't really, didn't really celebrate things growing up, which is yeah. So sorry for the really bad answer there, I guess, but not that I can remember, man. Not that I can remember. We had another super chat here. Nathan Milton emptying the pockets again, man. Which 2025 linebacker has the highest floor and ceiling? Oh, that's a good one. I like Nathan. I like that one a lot. Highest ceiling, I would say, is Marco Jones out of San Ramon Valley in California. My guy is 6'4", 215 pounds, can run, folks. Closing speed is outrageous. He was in the update that Brian put out. Notre Dame is in good standing with Marco Jones early on. He is probably the most athletic player that I have seen at linebacker in the 2025 class. So I would say he's probably the highest ceiling player that I've seen at linebacker in 2025. Highest floor, that's an interesting one. Let me think here. I'm actually going to pull up my list of guys that Notre Dame's offered and see if someone pops out really quickly for me. I feel like there's a lot of upside at linebacker, but I'm not sure if there's a lot of like. Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I would go with like Madden Faremo, who Notre Dame isn't really like pushing for. Like, I don't think Notre Dame is just. I don't think Notre Dame's done enough for that one to like really push the envelope type of thing for Madden Faremo. But Madden Faremo is a California kid who's like 6'3", 220 something already, just like super physical downhill. They don't ask him to do much in coverage or anything, but like he's just always in the right spot, man. He just always is. So I'll say Madden Faremo is the highest floor. I'll say Marco Jones is the highest ceiling. That's kind of how I see a couple of those guys. All right. So let's now go to. We had Beefeater ND08. What's up, Beefeater? Says, good afternoon, Ryan. Good afternoon to you too, sir. If Nick Saban retires this offseason, who would Notre Dame be looking to pick off? I mean, man, that's a great question. I mean, at the point, it would be the 2024 class would be done, right? Like, I mean, you wouldn't be able to get anybody late unless Saban does it like at the end of the season. I think 2025 class would be where you would look. And Matt D, I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw it on Twitter. It was wild. I actually haven't talked to Marco about that yet, but it seems like a wild story. I mean, wide receiver would be where I would turn, I guess. I mean, people mentioned Jamie French earlier, right? So, I mean, if there was movement in Alabama and they were, had just some defections, I guess, would I take a look at Jamie French again in 2025? Sure. I mean, like he's a really talented kid. There's a reason that Notre Dame was so high on him to begin with. That's the first guy that comes to my mind, honestly, Beefeater. I just think that the time is going to be a little bit too late for 2024 kids. 2025, though, it would definitely be it would definitely be Jamie French at wide receiver. And then, I mean, if there's defections from the roster, I mean, we've talked about it, but like if Keon Keeley wants to come play at Notre Dame, Keon Keeley can come play at Notre Dame. I mean, if you're just asking me from a roster perspective, there's a lot of guys I consider. A lot of guys. I mean, Alabama is not hurting for talent, folks. Like they're not hurting in that capacity. So are there some Alabama players that I would love to explore the option if there's defections on that roster after a Saban retirement? Sure. But Keon Keeley from a roster perspective, Jamie French from a 2025 perspective. Those are the two guys that really popped in my head quickly. We had Archer said, "Who will be Notre Dame's biggest rival on the recruiting trail in 2025?" That's a great question, Archer. 2025. So I'm trying to think of like the demographic that Notre Dame's going after, right? And we talked about because like for the I think it would be a better answer for you if I just kind of gave you a little bit of insight into like some of the spots that Notre Dame is looking at for the rest of the 2025 class. Cause I really think ultimately that's where would determine like who's the big, like if it was all Midwestern kids, then it would be Ohio State most likely, right? Cause if it's a big time kid in the Midwest, Ohio State's probably looking at them most likely, maybe a Michigan, like that type of thing. But as for players that Notre Dame's looking at right now, I mean, I'm looking at some Midwestern kids, but I'm looking at some Northeast. Man, it's really all over the place. Looking at a Georgia kid. I'm looking at a Texas kid. I'm looking at Derek Meadows out of Las Vegas. I'm looking at Wisconsin kids on the offensive line. I'm looking at Connecticut kids. Defensive line wise, I'm Christopher Burgess is an Illinois kid, Indiana kid, and Damian Shanklin. Looking at Isaiah Campbell out of North Carolina. You're looking at Austin Alexander out of Kansas, Bryce Davis, Hayden Lowe, California, with Matt Johnson as well. Linebacker, you're kind of all over the board. I guess Archer, I guess for me, I would still go with Ohio State, even though Notre Dame is recruiting nationally, and even though Ohio State also recruits nationally, so like that's not much of a difference. But I think that a lot of kids that Notre Dame has offered, Ohio State is also looking at to a degree. So I will defer to Ohio State. I want to say USC because there's actually a lot of Western kids that Notre Dame's looking at, but I don't think USC just cares that much about high school recruiting right now. So I'm still going to say Ohio State because ultimately, if Notre Dame wants to get to where they need to go with stay power, you have to overtake Ohio State in some years from the recruiting perspective, like because they have dominated, obviously, recruiting from a Midwestern power perspective. So I'll say Ohio State, but it's not like a firm one because Notre Dame's kind of all over the board in 2025. We had a couple back to back, I think, from Chris Ayers, and I'll bring this one up. Would anyone else like to see at least one series with Jay Nosberry, Drake Bowen, JT, and Snead on the field at the same time? I mean, yes. I mean, I would say, Chris, I think this was more meant for just the chat, right? Most likely, but I think that yes, I would love to see some of the younger linebackers start to get filled in. I'm not even talking about like together necessarily, but like, can we get a series where Jane Osbury's in the game? Can we get a series where Drake Bowen's in the game with a couple of the veterans? Can we get a where Jalen Snead is in with a couple of the older guys? I mean, I think you start mixing and matching a little bit more because it's great that for the most part, Maris Loifel, JD Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, like they're playing good football for the most part, right? Like together. But I do think that mixing and matching some of the young skill sets, I think would be very advantageous for the rest of the year. And then ultimately, like if one or two of those guys don't come back, those guys are going to have to play, right? So getting them a little bit of experience now, I think could be big, especially down the stretch where you're playing against Pitt. You should handle relatively easily if you play your game. Clemson, I still expect Clemson to give them a little bit of, a game. I expect that to still be a little bit back and forth, but then you play You play Wake, you play Stanford. Like Notre Dame, I think, has a couple opportunities down the stretch here where you should get some younger guys some playing time here. So, yes, I would love to see some of the younger cats play. There's no doubt about it. We had Chris also said, will Eli Raritan get a target the rest of the year? I hope so. I mean, Chris, I think that there was a little bit of a let's bring him back slowly, not overload him type of thing. But I mean, yeah, Eli Raritan is 6'6, 250 plus pounds and can run. So if there's a way that you can get him in the passing game and getting him confident as a pass receiver, I'm all for it, man. I'm all for it. So I hope that it happens. We had Civil Engineer '08 says, why not Cooper Perry? That kid can play. Of course, this is Cooper Perry out of Scottsdale, Arizona, Notre Dame Prep, wide receiver in the 2025 class. So I knew someone was going to ask about this at some point. I told you guys the board that I think Notre Dame is focusing on right now, and Cooper Perry is not on it currently. So I think that Notre Dame liked Cooper Perry. I just think that at this point they like some other players better. Do I think that they're wrong? Yes, I do. I do. Full transparency. I think they're wrong. But Notre Dame has made the decision, I believe, at this point. Derek Meadows, Talon Taylor, Jerome Bettis Jr., Quincy Porter, Dalen McCutcheon are the players that Notre Dame is super focused on right now. I think it's a mistake because I really think that he is a really good football player. But that's where we are. And yes, IGK, civil engineering. He actually messaged me. I forget if it was on Twitter or on the message board, but that is what that stands for. So civil engineering is what the abbreviated wording here is. So, but yes, Cooper Perry on the board, but not a guy that Notre Dame's pushing for right now. So that's where we are. Archer, I saw your question about that earlier. I am getting that one up now because we might as well talk about a couple of the guys that maybe Notre Dame's not pushing for. Archer452 said, did I miss Rowan Burns' name or is Notre Dame not recruiting him anymore? There's some background noise here, so I missed bits and pieces. Archer, you did not miss his name. Notre Dame has made the decision. Notre Dame has made the decision that Rowan Byrne is not a player that Notre Dame is going to push for. They were in a great position early. I would call Notre Dame probably the leader at one point, but I think that quite simply, there are other offensive linemen on the board that Notre Dame likes more. I think that's what it comes down to. So, Owen Strebig, Matty Augustine, Will Black, Josh Petty, Michael Roski. That's the board right now of guys that I think Notre Dame is keeping close tabs on and pushing for. They have made the decision that Rowan Byrne will not be a part of those plans. So, unfortunate, but it's a decision that was made. And honestly, like hearing a little bit of the background of the decision, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Like the Cooper Perry one, I don't agree with. Rowan Byrne, I liked Rowan as a player. I still like Rowan as a player, but I understand that one a lot more. I understand that one, especially talking about a couple of the guys that are on the board for Notre Dame. So that's where we are. Rowan Byrne not in the plans as of now. Eric Santini said, is Will Black kind of like Anthony Knapp with the upside wise? No, I actually think they're a little bit different, Eric. I think that for me, Anthony Knapp always had a pretty nice floor, but I question the ceiling. I think his ceiling might be a little bit higher than I gave him credit for early on in the process. But I think Will Black is actually much more of an upside player, much more. I think that he's a player that you look at and say at 6'7, 285, 290 pounds, still kind of skinny. He has massive upside. I think he could be a blindside protector at the next level. So I just think they're kind of polar opposites. They're kind of different. Anthony Knapp's 6'4 and a half, maybe 6'5. A little bit of a guy that still needs to fill out. But I mean, Black just has a different body type, different upside to me. So a little bit different. But I understand where that question's coming from. All right, we had another question from Josh Miller. Says, feels like a pattern is forming in this recruiting high floor guy 1 year, high ceiling guy the next. Is that what you are seeing? In some areas, yeah, Josh, I would say so. I think that if you get a CJ Carr in 2024, for instance, it's much easier to recruit a high ceiling kid, maybe a little bit of a lower floor comparative. And it kind of counterbalances too, right? Because I don't want all high floor players on the roster because that limits how good they could be because the ceilings are usually a little lower. I don't want all ceiling players on the roster either, because that means that there's a lot of boomer bust that could happen. I want a balance there, right? So I think, yes, I would say that you get some high floor players one year, lot more high ceiling players the next, and you also counterbalance within classes as well. Like I think that you look at like the defensive line class in 2025 or 2024, excuse me, is a perfect example. Like Bryce Young was a high ceiling, lower floor player. His floor is coming up a little bit now with the season he's having, but he's a much different player than Cole Mullins, in my opinion, right? Cole Mullins is much more the high floor. Maybe his ceiling's not that high type of player. And I think Sean Sevillano is a little bit of the same way. So I think you kind of counterbalance the ceilings with floors within classes. But I also think, like, just from a year to year perspective, yeah, I think that that definitely comes in play. I think quarterback's the perfect example, going from CJ Carr to Deuce Knight. Like, that is very good. I think that's a good comparison and a good example of that. Right. We have Archer 452 says for 2025 to be better than 2024, what hit rate of top targets would Notre Dame have to get, and how realistic would that finish be? It's a great question, Archer. I think for it to be better, you would have to be about 80% of hits, because we always know that there's guys that come out of nowhere, have big senior seasons that maybe you come on late and then kind of rise throughout the process. How realistic is it? I actually think it's pretty realistic, because I don't like usually predicting that high of the hit rates, because we know that stuff in the recruiting world is so volatile. Things change so quickly. But I actually think, kind of looking at this board, Notre Dame's in a good spot, man. They are, like, they're in a good spot with several of these players. I think their hit rate could be very high in 2025. So, um, yeah, I think that you have a good chance of making a better class in 2024 ultimately, because I think there's a chance there. Now, Notre Dame has to prove me right? But I think they have a chance. Yes. So about 80 plus percent, I guess. But I think it's actually attainable, which I would not usually predict, because that's a high percentage. But Notre Dame has a shot, man. They have a shot. All right, I gotta take this one out. I answered that super chat for Nathan, but he had another one. Nathan Milton, thoughts on Michigan cheating? Man, such a broad question, Nathan. Thoughts on them cheating? One, I'm not surprised, I guess. One, because a lot of this stuff happens. I mean, Michigan's the whipping boy here for the extreme that they took it to, but they're not the only school in college football that cheats, right? They're not. I mean, we've talked a lot about the recruiting stuff and, like, a lot of improper benefits that are going out there that do not fit the mold of NIL. But my thoughts on Michigan is, one, you took it to an extreme level, and a way too high of a level. Like, there's sign stealing everywhere, but not this to this degree, man. Where, like, this guy, where they basically have someone on their staff that's whole job is this, and they have them go into different games to do this, and just doing it completely out of the realm of what is accepted, right? So they took it to a much extreme level. They're now stacking a bunch of these things, right? Like the recruiting violations. Now on top of this, it's an extremely bad look for the program. It is. And I think for me, ultimately, and also I would put on this, is that you were also stupid enough to get caught, right? Like, every school cheats, sure, but not every school gets caught. So if you're gonna be a cheater, at least be a good cheater, right? Like, they're not even a good cheater, which is just hysterical. So they took it to way to an extreme level. They were very, like, just not thorough with at least hiding it. And I think the repercussions are going to come. Again, we'll see what the ultimate hearing is for it and what the ultimate stipulations are for everything. But it looks really bad right now. It looks really, really bad for Michigan. So am I surprised? No. Am I surprised that they took it to that extreme of a level? A little bit. Or am I even more surprised that they got caught so blatantly? Yeah, because I did not think that they would be that stupid, but they are very dumb. Very dumb for getting caught the way they did. Man, I'm losing my voice here on the podcast. Losing my voice a little bit. All right, let's go to. All right. Let's go. Sorry, I'm looking at this one. All right. We're going to Irish AJ. What's up, Irish AJ? Nice of you to drop by. Said beer of choice to celebrate. Actually, I'm not a huge beer guy. If I do have a beer, it's a sour. I like a good sour beer, but I'm a whiskey guy. I always have been a whiskey guy. So for me, like I mean, if I had to have a beer again, it would be some type of sour, and I do enjoy that, but I've always been a whiskey guy. I don't know what it is, but I'm also like a pretty easy whiskey guy in the sense that I don't need a mix or anything. It's just like Jameson rocks, like cool. I'll sip it. You know what I mean? Like that's just it's just always how I play type of thing. So, if I'm feeling a little different, I guess I can, get a whiskey sour because I do like sour, but yeah, I'm just a how are sour beers snobby? I was that a snobby thing? I never heard that before, IGK. Is that a snobby thing? Is that a snobby thing? But no, whiskey. Like, we'll shoot some whiskey. If I'm ever in town again, if anybody's in town, we could shoot some whiskey, by the way. I don't know what it is. I remember the first time I got drunk, I also stole some Irish whiskey out of my parents' bar area. And so from the beginning, man, from the beginning, it's all been all whiskey for me, I guess. So, yeah, got my taste early and kept it coming, I guess. Kept it coming. So, always been a whiskey guy, man. Oh man, sour beers are delicious though, my friend. They're good. Good beer. I like a good sipper, good sipper. I mean, when I was young, it was just like whatever you can get your hands on, and the easiest stuff. Like, I guess I'm a Miller Lite guy, kind of, but not really. But I remember when I was growing up, where I grew up, it was like you were drinking the cheapest stuff you could find, like Natty Light and Keystone and that type of thing, right? Like, I was never a beer snob, I guess is my main point. Like, I got into craft beers for a little bit there, but like, was never really a beer snob. So I guess nowadays I'm just like, I want something that has a little bit of flavor and a little bit of bite. I don't want Matty, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. Hey, the High Life, Miller High Life, is that what we're talking about? I mean, yeah, I mean, like literally, it was like Natty, Keystone growing up. Like, yeah. So that's Miller Light, I guess, when I got a little more classy. And then now that I don't drink beer very often, I just go to something that tastes good. And for me, sour beers taste good. So, but I'm a whiskey guy. Always will be a whiskey guy. Always till the end. To the end. And when was young? Young, I mean, high school, right? Like high school drinking. Uh, Milwaukee's best. Oh gosh, there's some bad beers in here, guys. Really bad one. This is funny. My dad does listen to the podcast, so I don't know if he's listening to this, but he likes Molson Ice, which is a Canadian beer, and it is the worst beer I've ever had in my entire life. It tastes awful, and it's so heavy and just like, ugh. No thanks. Molson Ice stinks. If anybody out there likes Molson Ice, I just can't be friends. Sorry, we can't be friends. I look at my dad a lot differently now, knowing that he loves Molson Ice. So, yeah, yeah. But those were the good old days, I guess, kind of. We had a question here, getting back on track from IL underscore Irish 82. Seems like a lot of guys are coming for the second, third trips to Notre Dame. What is the over under of commits coming out of this weekend? It's a great question. There are a lot of guys that are coming. So there won't be a lot of commits this weekend because it's not a big number, obviously, right? I mean, we're only talking about 4 guys that have legitimate offers right now that I think could even be slightly on commit watch. I would say the number coming out of the weekend is 1.5. I would set the over under at 1.5 on how many guys. If you ask me to pick, I would say over, but not by a lot. I think it's either going to be 1 or 2 commits coming out of the weekend, but not necessarily public very quickly. But I think that they can close on 1 to 2 guys this weekend, if that makes sense. So, great question. Ian Johnson says, who are the 5-star caliber talents on the 2025 board? It's a great question, Ian. So, of Notre Dame players that Notre Dame is pushing for that I believe could or are currently 5-star talents. Sorry, I'm reading some of these bad beers. Oh, Mad Dog. Oh man, we're talking Mad Dog in the chat right now. Mad Dog 2020. I mean, again, I when I was young, sure, 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 we could do that, I guess. But yeah, man, you guys have some bad taste. This is bad taste. That's why you listen to me on a Friday because you have bad taste. You know what I'm saying? 5-star players. Colt 45. Oh gosh, you guys need to chill in the chat, man. Chill. All right. 5-star talents. I'm sorry, Ian. You know how I am, man. I get a little distracted sometimes. 5-star potential players in this class. I think Deuce Knight has 5-star potential as of today. I think that he's also putting together a nice little string of games after transferring back from Lipscomb Academy over to George County. I think he's put together 4 straight games of really good ball, and he's trending in the great direction. I think Deuce Knight has 5-star upside, 5-star talent. I think that's the only player that's committed currently that I would say is 5-star talent or upside. I think Talon Taylor is a 5-star potential player. I think Quincy Porter is a 5-star potential player. Derek Meadows is 5-star upside, but he is far from a 5-star player today, and I don't see him reasonably getting there yet. Owen Strebig, I think, is a 5-star potential player. I do. I think Josh Petty is a 5-star potential player. Defensive line wise, I think Christopher Burgess is a 5-star potential player. Linebackers on the board for Notre Dame. Marco Jones, I think, is a 5-star potential player. Nathaniel Owusu Boateng, I believe, is a 5-star potential player. Nasir Wyatt, who Notre Dame is recruiting, but I just don't think that that's going to be a reasonable one, is a 5-star potential player. I think Jadon Blair, safety out of North Carolina, Mount Tabor, is a 5-star potential player. Defensive back wise, I don't know if I would say any of those kids are 5 stars. Just a bunch of good 4-star players, in my opinion. So again, I would say Jadon Blair, 5-star potential player. Marco Jones, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, Nasir Wyatt, Christopher Burgess, Owen Strebig, Talon Taylor, Quincy Porter, Deuce Knight. I think those are 5-star potential players on the board that have that upside that I think is achievable, right? Like, I'm not going to throw out every guy that I just think is 5-star talents because that would be a long list. But of guys that I think could potentially get there, I think that those are reasonable ones for me. They're reasonable. All right, let's go to the next one. 99 Pros of BK1. 90 Pros, what's up, man? Haven't seen you lately. What's up? Just joined at the start of the mailbag, so sorry if any questions have already been answered. Any surprise recruits in the 2024-2025 class that wouldn't surprise you as much as it may surprise us? That's a great question. It's a great question. I think so. I did a little bit of a extra recruiting show. I believe it's on the podcast app. If you haven't seen it, 99 Problems. But of players that I would say are guys that I think Notre Dame fans just need to pay more attention to that maybe you haven't in the past. Just guys that I think have been on the board, but like we need to really like hone in on is like these are in the top group of guys. Will Black, offensive lineman, offensive tackle out of the state of Connecticut, I think is a player that Notre Dame fans need to be more aware of, just keep a closer eye on. I think Damian Shanklin, defensive end out of Indianapolis, Indiana, is a player that Notre Dame fans should keep a closer eye on. I think Hayden Lowe, who's a Viper out of the state of California, is a player that Notre Dame fans should keep a closer eye on. I think Matt Johnson, defensive end out of De La Salle in Concord, California, is another player that Notre Dame fans should keep a closer eye on. Marco Jones, I've mentioned. I think Notre Dame fans are keeping an eye on him, but like maybe a little bit closer. Other than that, Josiah Kia, who's the younger brother of Kahanu Kia, I think Notre Dame fans should keep a closer eye on as far as guys that Notre Dame is pushing for and that they're making a priority to a degree. And then Kevin Humes, the defensive back out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland, I think is the other guy that we don't talk about a lot as a cornerback option, but I think he is a legitimate option. So those are a few guys, though. Again, Kevin Humes, Josiah Kia, Marco Jones, Damian Shanklin, Hayden Lowe, Matt Johnson, Will Black. Those are the guys I think Notre Dame fans should just keep a little bit closer eye on that maybe don't get talked about enough. Oh, that's a great question. Here we go. Ian Johnston with the question that everyone has been wondering about this entire podcast. What's your favorite kind of cake to celebrate your birthday with? Oh man, here's the hot take, right, folks? I think some people know this because I think someone actually asked this before, maybe last year, or this has kind of been just brought up in general conversation. I think at some point, don't correct, if I'm wrong, I apologize for misspeaking here. My favorite type of cake is carrot cake. I know that's super. Oh gosh, Nathan, you're about to get booted, man. I like carrot cake a lot, which I know is perceived as an old man dessert. It's fine. I'm 32 now. I'll fight with the old men now. It's fine. I love good carrot cake. My favorite cake actually is something that my wife got for me a few years ago during my birthday. I've actually had a couple times. Carrot cake cheesecake, which was literally like a carrot cake, cheesecake in the middle, and then another carrot cake on the bottom. Brother, it's dope, man. Because you know what's the best is the carrot cake that has the cream cheese frosting on it, right? Imagine that with now imagine just a cheesecake in the middle of a carrot cake. Just imagine that for me. Just imagine. It's fantastic, man. So good. I love carrot cake. Love carrot cake. Tommy, I'm not putting that chat up because carrot cake is a vegetable. Sure, Chris. Yes. After I eat a carrot cake, I'm like, you know what? You know what? I just ate a vegetable, man. I'm good. I don't need to work out tonight. I don't need to do push-ups. What you mean? Just ate a vegetable, sir. Just ate a vegetable. Carrot cake's dope. I love carrot cake. And if you haven't had carrot cake cheesecake, if you know someone that makes it, do it. Just do it. Don't overthink it. Don't second guess it. I think we're just doing cupcakes this year because my daughter is now about to turn 3 in January, so she's in a big like cupcake phase. So I think we're just going to do like individual cupcakes, and I think I'm getting a carrot cake cupcake. So there we go. We had PK. What's up, PK? Says in a perfect world, we would get a transfer quarterback next year to handle the Texas A&M. I don't agree necessarily. I mean, like in a perfect world, would it be great if a quarterback that's first that it starts 2024 season off is a guy that has some semblance of experience? Sure. I mean, like we can agree there, but is it a perfect world? I wouldn't necessarily think that because there could be I mean, like not all experience is the same for one, and for two, just because the guy's experience doesn't mean they're good. Doesn't mean that their upside is great. I want to play a young kid this year. If I don't get a stud as a transfer quarterback, I want to play a young kid. Throw him to the wolves. Let him learn. Because you know what? Texas A&M is not that good, man. They have some good defensive players. It's a tough situation to be in as far as being in Kyle Fields, but you'll be okay. I don't want. I think we're acting like you're throwing him to the wolves and throwing him at Georgia next year. Like I think we're acting like that, throwing him to the wolves in that regard. Play a young kid, let him grow, let him learn. The best quarterbacks are the ones that when they get into adverse situations, they can surprise you a little bit. And they get thrown to the wolves and they're able to come out on the other side. So I don't necessarily agree. If you tell me that you can get an absolute stud where it's like, cool, he's stud, he's got experience, and he's also really talented, cool, man, we can have that conversation. But I'm not getting an experienced guy to sacrifice development if it's not a stud. I'm not doing that. I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. I'll roll with Kenny Minchie as a redshirt freshman. I'll roll with CJ Carr. I'll roll with some of the younger cats. I will personally. Again, I don't make those decisions. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. I would love to see a young guy going into Kyle Field next year and seeing what they do against the great Texas A&M team that has not been so great recently. Again, I know they got some good defensive linemen. Shamar Stewart's good, and they got some good dudes, right? I'm not throwing it out there like that, but I, yeah, let a kid grow. Let a kid grow. Um, Tommy, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer that one either, man. This is oh man, Vince is your favorite because I like carrot cake. Doesn't even make sense. Doesn't even make sense. Okay. I just think you wanted to dislike me, okay? If carrot cake is the reason that you didn't want to like me, IL_Irish82, just say it, all right? Don't disrespect carrot cake like that, sir. Don't disrespect carrot cake like that. Also, Vince is very likable, so like, cool, good. IGK Irish49 says if Kenny Minchie wins the quarterback job in the spring, do you think Steve Angeli will stick around? I have no idea. I genuinely don't. In theory, if you're getting passed up by a younger player, is other pastures the better pasture at times. But I think a lot of things go into that conversation though. One, what is Steve's expectations? Two, will he have his degree? How easy of a destination will it be? I mean, like, there's just so many things that will go into that conversation. So I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I hope he doesn't because that really sacrifices depth, obviously. But I have no idea, man. I have no idea. I really don't. IGK, like, I think it's very, like, just very speculative right now. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Not sure. I wish I can give you a better answer, but I don't know Steve personally. I know he loves Notre Dame, so will that make him? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. There's going to be defections at some point, right? I'm not even saying just quarterback, but as Notre Dame's roster gets stronger and the depth continues to improve, there's going to be guys that are going to leave at some point, and we need to come to terms with that. Like, that's a reality that we're going to face eventually, in my opinion. All right, we're coming down on the last few here, folks. Let's get going. We had Chris Ayers who said, "Which player, if you have to, you going to replace Cooper Perry with?" So the players that are on Notre Dame's board, if Notre Dame pushes it to 4 wide receivers, Dalen McCutcheon would be the guy that I would want because I think he brings a lot of similar things, Chris, that Cooper also brings in the sense that he's very he's a very mature player in the sense of finding soft spots, getting in and out of breaks, route technician, but also Dale McCutcheon brings some juice after the catch as well. Like, he can win in space a ton. So if Notre Dame went to 4, and let's say they got the 3 top targets on the board of Taylon Taylor, Derek Meadows, Jerome Bettis Jr., Dale McCutcheon would be the guy that's on the board that I would love. I would also be very happy with Quincy Porter, though. I just don't think that one's incredibly likely as of today. But Dale McCutcheon would be a great get for Notre Dame. I would be very happy with that one. We had Archer 452 says some talk is that Ohio State is recruiting Dorian Brew as safety now. Is Notre Dame still recruiting him as corner? And if so, FYI, you know what his preference is. So I don't think there actually is a preference. Archer, every time he's talked to me, he's said that he just wants to play football and whatever spot is best for him. Notre Dame was recruiting him as a corner. I think they're still going to recruit him, but I just don't think there's a ton of traction there. I think Ohio State is the team to beat for Dorian Brew as of today, and I still believe that even with his move down to Texas, I still think that they are the team to beat. And I don't think Notre Dame is. I still think they're going to recruit him, but I just don't think that one's going to happen. The cornerback group, the guys that you're going to really need to keep an eye out on from Notre Dame's perspective, for me, are Dallas Golden, Creed Thomas. Just went blank for a second. Mark Zachary, Devin Williams, and Kevin Humes. Those are the 5 guys that Notre Dame is really kind of focused on at corner. Again, I think they'll continue to have conversation with Dorian Brew, but I just think that there's a lack of momentum there. A lack of traction recently there. So yeah. All right. All right. Let me get to the last couple here. All right. Archer again with a back-to-back. Did you hear about the Colorado commit that is sitting out the rest of the senior year to prep to enroll early? I can't hit that more than I already do. Archer, I agree. So it's Aaron Butler, who's a wide receiver out of the state of California. Notre Dame was actually recruiting him as a corner for a little bit in the 2024 class. Hate it, man. I hate it. Look, ultimately, Aaron Butler and his family can do whatever the heck they want. And if there's an injury involved, then okay, shutting it down, whatever. But I've heard that there isn't an injury involved. It's just that his team isn't very good. And he's decided that he is going to, prep for next level and make sure he's ready to enroll early and all that type of stuff. I hate it, man. I hate it. Because I think that I don't think we're ever going to be able to draw a line again, man. And when this is acceptable and when it's not acceptable. Like, guys prepping for the NFL, like, I get it. You have millions of dollars on the line. Guys going to college, I get it. You have a scholarship offer on the line, a free education on the line. But, like, you are a 17-year-old in high school, man, who is still developing as a football player. You're telling me that Aaron Butler couldn't get something out of playing 5 or 6 more football games and practicing every day for the next level, that wouldn't have helped him in any way. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I think that's going to stunt development a little bit. And I think that that's not going to open up the possibility for a lot more players to choose to do this, man. I hate that. I hate that. I really don't like it. I don't like it. It's his decision. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Doesn't mean I have to like it. Do not like the Aaron Butler decision. I did not like that. That happened a few weeks ago. Hated it then. Still hate it now, man. I don't, yeah. Don't like it. Don't like it at all. Just my opinion, but hate it. Hate it. Agree, Archer. Can't hate it more than I already do. Can't. Josh Buffalo, the motivational business banker, as we're wrapping up here. What does his cheating scandal from University of Michigan do to their current recruiting or next year's class? Anyone we are completing with them on? Not as much, Josh. Like honestly, like Notre Dame and Michigan don't have a ton of head-to-head battles, and they did in 2024, and they don't in 2025 as of today. I mean, Taylor's, I guess, the main guy that I think of that like he's high on Michigan is like he likes Michigan as well. So maybe that is a help, I guess. I think, look, I think that recruiting had been deteriorating a little bit for Michigan. 2024, they started getting it on the right spot, but I think it hurts for sure. I think it also hurts the fact that, like, I'm sure that we're going to hear more smoke about Jim Harbaugh leaving for the NFL after all this situation. I'm sure it's going to happen. And if you look back to what it did to his 2022 class, 2023 class, when all that smoke was out there, I think it hurt it for sure. So I think this will hurt, no doubt about it. I think it will hurt. Man, I'm really losing my voice here. We need to wrap up soon, man. About to lose my voice. Oh, I actually clicked off a question by accident. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Nathan Milton with a super chat. Why are we doing this one, man? What alcohol would you compare BK to? For me, it's tequila. Oh, you don't like tequila? Look, I don't drink tequila. I don't dislike tequila though, but tequila and me have a love-hate relationship, so I don't really drink tequila anymore, but I don't dislike tequila. I'll say this. When we went on my honeymoon, me and my wife, we went on a Western Caribbean cruise and we stopped in Mexico. I will say this, there's a big difference, Nathan, between the tequila that you're going to get in the States and the actual Mexican tequila. I'll leave it at that. Mexican tequila is the jam. That is really good stuff. It's a little sweeter. It's just delicious, man. It's really good. If I had to compare Brian Kelly to a beer or an alcohol, man, what is snooty but doesn't have substance? What is snooty but doesn't have substance? Okay, I'll compare Brian Kelly to Jägermeister. Jägermeister in its sole form is not bad, but you can't have too much of it or else you get sick. Is that good? Jägermeister. That'll be mine. Don't hate Jägermeister for a shot or two. Don't hate Jägermeister for just a sip. But once you have too much Jaeger, you feel terrible. You feel awful. So yeah, that's mine, I guess. Brian Kelly is Jägermeister. Man, the things I get asked on this channel, man. The things I get asked on this channel. I don't even understand. All right. This might be the last one, depending on if we get anything late. Nathan Milton also had a question of which recruits should we be most excited about? Nathan, real quick in the chat. Are we talking 2024, 2025? You need to help me out here, sir. You need to give me a little bit more than just saying recruit. Recruit is a very general thing, right? It's very general. So 2024, 2025. What are we talking about here? I'm waiting for a quick one here. Come on. Come on. Any. Okay. 2024. It's a lot, man. I mean, I think you should be most excited about. I'll pick one on both sides of the ball. I guess I'll go to 2025. I think offensively, Cam Williams is my answer. I think Cam is the best player in the 2024 class for Notre Dame. I'm saying the draft in the 2024 class for Notre Dame, and he's a position that you need very much. So I would say Cam Williams on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, man, I think I've go a bunch of different ways. I'll say Bryce Young. Bryce Young has had a tremendous senior year. I think that he is going to be a stud on the next level. So I'll say Bryce Young in 2024 defensively, Cam Williams offensively. 2025, as of right now, we only have 7 commits in the class. I'll say Deuce Knight offensively. And then I'll say defensively, CJ May. pass rusher are the guys that I would be most excited about as of today. That's going to do it here, folks. Notre Dame Recruiting Hour here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Before you leave, if you just hit that like button for me, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell. If you're listening to me on any of your favorite podcast platforms, 5-star reviews are very much appreciated. Thank you all so much for the great questions, a little bit of conversation in the chat. Y'all are awesome. Go Irish, beat Pitt. We'll talk to you again very soon here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.